Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking a really critical deep dive into one of the most foundational concepts in the New Testament: humility.
But it's one that's so often misunderstood.
Exactly. Our focus is the early church in Philippi and this urgent letter Paul wrote to them from prison, where he pleads with them to count others more significant than yourselves.
And this wasn't just, some abstract theological point he was making. This was a direct response to a crisis.
Right. Our mission here is to really excavate the source materials, these deep teachings on Acts and Philippians, to uncover the specific conflict Paul was addressing. I mean, what kind of pride was so corrosive it was tearing apart the very first church he'd founded on European soil?
To answer that, you absolutely have to start with the geography and the cultural friction of the place. If you just read the words on the page, you miss the explosive context.
Okay, so set the scene for us.
We're talking about a community planted firmly in the Gentile world, way out in the Aegean Sea region, far from Jerusalem.
In Philippi specifically, it was this blend of two massive competing cultures.
Precisely. Politically, it was a Roman colony, so you've got Roman law, Roman administration, and this is key, the Roman obsession with hierarchy, status, and authority.
But the people themselves were steeped in Greek culture.
Deeply. So that means polytheism, intellectual debates, and the worship of human excellence, power. Apollo, Venus, Mars, all of that.
So into this world walks Paul, presenting a faith centered on a crucified Jewish Messiah who's talking about radical self-denial and service. I mean, the clash must have been immense.
It was almost impossible. Status was everything in Roman society. Losing face, what they called infamia, was often considered worse than death. We'll come back to that. So when Paul arrives and starts this community, it initially finds its strength in two things: an intense love and charity and, good organization.
And this was a huge success story for him. His first major European church from a second missionary journey.
A massive success. But once he leaves, once he's imprisoned in Rome, that powerful cultural gravity, that Roman need for hierarchy, and the Greek tendency to split into factions, it just starts pulling the church apart.
So it sounds like the problem wasn't bad doctrine, at least not at first. It was relational. It was about people.
It was. And that brings up the question, who were the people who founded this church? And how did their strengths become the very things that divided them?
And the sources trace this right back to the two most famous converts in Acts 16, the literal founding pillars of the church.
Lydia and the jailer. Their stories could not be more different, yet both of them showed this incredible, radical humility at the moment of their conversion.
Let's start with Lydia, the successful businesswoman. The material we looked at really emphasizes her title, a seller of purple cloth. That sounds kind of mundane to us.
But it was anything but. The wealth and status behind that title they're almost impossible for us to overstate.
Why was purple so important?
The dye, often called Tyrian purple, was hideously expensive. It took thousands of crushed shellfish, these little mollusks, just to produce a tiny amount of pigment.
So it's the color of royalty.
Right.
Reserved for high priests, emperors, the absolute elite.
Exactly. So Lydia wasn't just a merchant. She was likely a very wealthy, very successful international magnate. And she was also devout. She's praying by the river, observing the Sabbath.
And her act of humility right after she converts is just so powerful.
It is. She's baptized, and immediately, despite her immense wealth and social standing, she insists that Paul and Silas stay with her. She almost commands them.
If you adjudge me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay.
She uses her mansion, her resources, her social capital, all of it, for hospitality, for service. That's pure charity in action.
Okay, so that's pillar number one. Now let's contrast her with the second pillar, the jailer.
Yeah.
We're moving from high commerce and piety to the gritty reality of Roman administrative power.
Right. The jailer was an agent of the state, a Roman official. Paul and Silas had been arrested, severely beaten, and thrown into the innermost cell.
And this guy was probably a Gentile, maybe a career soldier or administrator.
Almost certainly. And his conversion happens in the middle of this high drama. Paul and Silas are praying, praising God, and then an earthquake. The doors fly open, the shackles break.
And the jailer wakes up, sees the open doors, and his first instinct is rooted in that Roman honor culture you mentioned.
His immediate reaction is to draw his sword and kill himself.
Death before the shame of failing his duty.
Exactly, but Paul stops him. He shouts, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here."
And that combination of the miracle and this completely unexpected integrity from a prisoner,
Yeah.
that's what breaks him.
It shatters his entire worldview. He drops to his knees, his Roman status just gone, and he asks, "Sirs, What must I do to be saved?
And the answer is so simple. Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household.
And like Lydia, his response is immediate practical humility. He tends to their wounds, his whole family is baptized, and he hosts them for a meal.
So you have these two incredibly strong foundations. Lydia's family, defined by wealth, success, and charity, and the jailer's family, defined by Roman power and a miraculous conversion. Well, so wait, if both of these powerful families started with such radical humility, what went wrong? What caused their strengths to become weaknesses after Paul left?
That is the essential question Paul is answering in his letter. The conflict wasn't about the truth of the gospel. It was about the use of their status inside the church.
So they were playing the old status games from Rome and Greece, but just in a new venue?
Exactly. You can just see the factions forming. The group connected to Lydia might have started relying on a kind of traditional superiority. We were here first, or our money keeps the lights on.
A sense of entitlement. They're looking down on the newer, maybe poorer, Gentile converts.
Precisely. They're relying on their pedigree and their wealth for authority. But then you have the other group, the one aligned with the jailer.
The Romans.
The Romans. Their worldview is all about hierarchy, efficiency, power. Their whole faith story is rooted in a dramatic miracle, the earthquake.
I can see the clash. That group might prioritize structure, visible signs of power, what we might call miracle chasing, over the slow, deep growth of doctrinal grounding.
It quickly devolved into fights about status, not service. One side says, we have the tradition and the funding. The other says, we have the political mindset and the proof of God's power. Both fell right into the Roman trap of vainglory.
Or as Paul calls it, conceit and selfish ambition. He's basically telling them, your Roman culture, the one that values the loud voice and the highest seat, has infected your assembly. You're behaving like citizens of Rome, not citizens of heaven.
That's the hard truth the material stresses. The church is not heaven. It's a gathering place for sinners who have been rescued by grace. The second you forget you were rescued, you start acting superior.
Because of your family name, your wealth account, or the dramatic story of your conversion.
And any great building built on that foundation, what the source calls the lust for status or honor, is a house built on sand. It will fall.
So how does Paul pivot from diagnosing the disease to providing the cure? He has to give them an anti-status model so powerful it just overrides everything they know from Rome.
He does, and he does it with what scholars call the Christ hymn in Philippians chapter 2. This is the cornerstone of his entire argument. He doesn't just say, be nice to each other.
No, he says, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus.
He uses the ultimate status, the pre-existent divine status of Christ, to show them the ultimate act of humility. It's something completely alien to Roman or Greek thought. Christ, who is in the form of God, did not see equality with God as something to be grasped, to be exploited for his own gain.
That's the critical moment, isn't it? He uses the highest possible status, deity, to model the lowest possible action.
He does. Paul says instead of clinging to that status, Christ emptied himself. The Greek word is kenosis. He took the form of a slave. He became human, and then humbled himself even further, to the point of death on a cross.
The most shameful, lowest form of execution in the entire Roman world.
The message to Lydia's faction is crystal clear. Your wealth and tradition are nothing compared to the glory Christ gave up. And the message to the jailer's faction is just as clear. Your focus on Roman power is invalidated because Christ chose the lowest possible status, a slave's death, before God exalted him.
So it's an anti-status manifesto. Your personal standing doesn't matter. What matters is following the pattern of service. The foundation for unity is recognizing we have absolutely nothing to boast about.
We are all just recipients of that grace, but this requires a really difficult balance, you know. You have to hold fast to the truth while also serving with a sincere heart.
And the sources use that incredible dual imagery of Christ to illustrate this, the whip and the towel.
Right. The whip, which Jesus used to cleanse the temple, shows that humility is not weakness. It's not being silent or afraid to defend truth and doctrinal sanctity. It's about maintaining order according to God's standard.
But then you have the towel and basin he used to wash the disciples' feet. That shows that strength and conviction must always, always be paired with a sincere heart for service and love.
And that's where Philippi failed. They separated the two. Some focused only on the whip, the structure, the order, the status. Others maybe focused too much on the towel, the experience, the emotion, but they didn't ground it in truth, and so pride crept back in.
The solution is integrating both. You stand firm on truth, like the whip, but you have a sincere heart for service, like the towel. That's true humility, strength under control.
Used not for personal gain, but for the unified purpose of the community.
So bringing this all together, what does this mean for us today? The story of Philippi is a powerful lesson that the health of any group, a church, a team, a company, it collapses the minute people start prioritizing their own status over the unifying purpose.
Paul wrote this letter because their reliance was shifting away from Christ as the foundation and onto the power or the personality or the wealth of its founders.
Which brings up a really important question for you, the listener. If you look at your own communities today, what are the visible signs that tell you if you're standing on the solid foundation of a unified purpose, the mind of Christ, or on the shaky ground of personal pride and tradition?
Yeah, and think about that enduring challenge posed by those two founding families, the wealthy merchant, Lydia, and the high-ranking Roman official, the jailer. It takes a conscious, active, anti-cultural effort for the person who funds the organization and the person who runs the operations to genuinely see each other as equals, to count the other as more significant than themselves. That, at the end of the day, is the necessary humility.